Hey Facebook, thank you for joining me today on the Money School with LaShawn Holland. I appreciate the fact that you are here. Today I'm going to talk about something that has hit all of us at one time or another, and it's called financial insecurity. And what started, originally I started out to talk about what's your financial IQ based off of an interview that I did with a presidential candidate. And we were talking about different things as it comes to, or as it relates to the economy, as it relates to what people are going through right now because of COVID-19 financially, as it relates to the language that people use around money, as it relates to a person's sight, on the potential of opportunity as it relates around money. And I was thinking about that earlier today, and then I had three specific conversations today that really made me decide to talk about this. And I run into this issue all the time, when I ask people what their financial IQ level is, or one of the things that I realize is that financial insecurity is a manifestation of self-worth problems and not net worth problems. And people think because I don't have enough to do what you're doing, or I'm not as smart as you financially, I can't do it. And those are really all self-worth issues. It has nothing to do with what's on their balance sheet. And I want to talk about, really break down, because there is a difference. One of the things that I know to be true, that I know for sure, is that people who have better financial education actually make better decisions, and so they invest at a different level, they accumulate assets on a different level, they build in a different way. And so our conversation last week really was about, well, what about the people who are so far down at the bottom that they can't even see a way out? And I personally believe that there is always a way out. You have to have a will and a want to. One of the things that years ago I used to hear my pastor say, how big is your want to? And, when you think about financial literacy, and really what it is, because most people think financial literacy is helping people get out of debt, and it's just not. Like, I have people all the time say, LaShawn, you must, for years they tell me this, you must have been great in math. Listen, I am horrible at math. Like, I barely got through calculus in college. And so math, accounting has nothing to do with math. It has everything to do with theory, really. And so when I say theory, even with money, it begins with how you think about it. And so financial literacy really is you not knowing how to, balance a checkbook. I had someone jump all over me on social media last week because I made the comment, I'm not against financial education being taught in school. That's not what I'm against. What I'm concerned is who is teaching the financial education that we have in schools. Because a person can only teach you either what's coming in a book, and how many of us know that book knowledge is not the same thing as life skills once you get out into the real world. And so if they're teaching, like most subjects are being taught, that's so old and so archaic in our educational system, then they're still not going to be prepared for how to be able to elevate in an economy like the one that we have here. How do I navigate during not only turbulent times, how do I navigate during great times also? And so financial literacy is really the possession of a set of skills and knowledge that allows an individual to make informed and effective decisions with all of their financial resources, right? It's not just their earned income, the money that they get from their job. It could be an inheritance that they're receiving from a parent. It could be money that they have in a portfolio on all levels. And so understanding that the basic financial concepts that are out here really allows people to know how to navigate in the financial system. And so people with appropriate financial literacy training make better financial decisions and master money better than those that really lack the training or have a lower financial IQ. And so And you don't get it one time. Like, you don't read something one time and get it. You don't even get it when you hear it the first, second, or third time. It takes you really being able to master something over and over and over again. And so recently I read this annual study that talked about, even today, actually I read it today, saying that Americans are still receiving a failing grade at personal finance. They're still receiving a failing grade just knowing the basic stuff about money. Recently, I read this annual study. Actually, I read it today, and it couldn't come at a worse time. That, like, the measurements of the statistics that they're trying to, they're trying to do it to coincide with our census. Right? Oh, caveat, if you have not gone online and filled out for your census, you really do need to. Didn't plan on saying that, but I think it is important. But it couldn't have come at a worse time. So, when we look at doing this global economic shift due to COVID-19 and coronavirus, with the pandemic causing massive market, volatility, job and income losses are really compiling at an unprecedented rate. And the level of financial just stress for Americans that, they haven't expressed or experienced since 2008. And then depending on how old you are, you may not have experienced it then either. And so in the last market correction, I know my oldest son came to me and he was like, Mom, to be honest, I know I was old enough to understand, but I didn't. When I hear people talk about how bad 2008, the real estate market and how bad the banking industry, the financial industry crash was, he was like, we didn't feel it at home. And that was one, because our household didn't experience the way that others had. I mean, we did have real estate that, went up in a bust because we got in, we bought way too high on it, but we learned how to just regroup, and that wasn't our only thing that we had going for us. And so the scary thing is that people didn't learn from the last market correction, to put cash away. I was just talking to someone today and I said, one of my girlfriends, and I was like, the scary part for me is I just don't think people really learn from 2008 or 2009. And oftentimes, I believe that you either win or you learn. And so things happen to you in life as learning opportunities meant for you not to repeat the same unbroken financial cycles that you may have repeated, before in the past. And so really, even for people with the six-figure deceiver, I have spoken to more people that are in the six-figure bracket that could not weather 2 weeks of what's going on with us, with our stay-at-home orders and them not working, and some of their jobs ran out. A lot of them that contacted me were in contract work. And so if the contract dried up, then they're without an income. And these were six-figure earners. And so people who don't make six figures think that that's like the golden parachute to get to six figures. And I'm not saying that it's not. What I am saying that I think you can be profitable no matter what level you're on. I think that there is a way for people to be profitable. And so a lot of times we're deceived in thinking once we make six figures, not really understanding that it's 50% money. Because, almost half of that goes back out in taxes, and you wonder why people feel like they can't get ahead financially. They can't get out of debt because they're living off of 50% money. They can't put money away. They can't invest because they're living off of 50% money. And so when I look at, high cash producing industries like barbershops and hairstylists and makeup artists, and I read about the things that they're going through because everything has been shut down. Even beauty salons, the difference in a person's financial knowledge is the difference in them being able to shift, or they stay stuck like a deer in headlights. I heard of a beauty supply store that read that as long as you are selling something that they deem as essential for this time during coronavirus, that you could stay open. And so guess what? They started making, and this is a beauty supply store, they started making masks for people and selling them for like $5.50 per mask. So they've been able to stay open, and they're one of the only beauty supply shops in the area that was able to stay open because they were smart and they understood how to pivot. How do you know that in times like this? Because it's the difference in your financial education that you have, which allows you to be able to see opportunities. And so even when I look at annual financial literacy surveys that are out here, there's one in particular that's conducted by the TIAA Institute, right? And one of the things that they put out here is that they found that Americans' biggest financial blind spot each year, it's been the same for the past 7 years consecutively, is that most Americans still are not very good at comprehending risk. And it's not about being doom and gloom. When I first started doing the savings challenge, I simply decided to do the savings challenge because I read how, the average American, if an emergency came up that cost them $400, they couldn't even put their hands on $400 to be able to do something. And so, and you see the statistics all over. 60% of Americans don't even have $1,000 saved up for retirement. That's a huge, concerning, alarming amount of people. 40%, again, of Americans said this is what made me do the savings challenge. If a $400 emergency popped up, they wouldn't be able to do it. Now, look what has popped up. We started doing the savings challenge probably about 4 years ago. And so I've had people now that has contacted me with showing their statements, sending me snapshots of them having $30,000 in their savings because they started a couple years ago when we started. And so that's one of the reasons why we started. I saw a need in the market. I was like, hey, I want to teach people how to make saving easy. And that's what we did. And so that's just one of the things, but they don't understand risk. When you understand risk, what it's not measuring how smart people are. It's not measuring how much people understand math, because that's not the case. It's really about understanding basic concepts that allow us to make good decisions. And so people only think about the stock market being risky a lot of times, but we face risk every single day in our lives. You not having an ample savings put away is a risk. What's the probability of a car breaking down? That is a risk. Risk management, financial risk management is not about investing. It's about the unexpected things that can happen. And we all know that coronavirus was unexpected. We didn't expect this, right? We didn't expect this to happen. When you look at the things that happened unexpectedly, there are 22 million people that have filed for unemployment now due to coronavirus. You got the looming food shortage, right? I saw where farmers said their food is rotting in their fields because they have no labor to come and harvest the harvest, and then they don't have transportation to get it out, and the government hasn't helped them yet. So they have food. You have a looming food shortage, and you have farmers that got food available but can't get it to people. Tyson's, the people who make breed chickens, right? They said that they're going to have a shortage also, and then Smithfield, the people who does pork, produces pork. They said that there may be a shortage. So you have the millions of people that have applied for unemployment, the looming food shortage. You have evictions because not all 50 states have agreed to halt evictions because of this unexpected event of coronavirus. And so we're in the middle of a pandemic now, and we face even more uncertainty even in the future. Because like I said before, I don't believe things are going to go back the same. And so here's where financial knowledge of risk can particularly be important. And so I remember years ago when my husband and I first got married, we had this lady who gave us one of the best pieces of financial advice. And she told us, she says, never buy a house, because we were in the market of buying our first home. And so we were really excited. And she says, listen, never buy a house where it takes 2 incomes to maintain the mortgage. And I've always kept those nuggets, in the back of my mind as I've gotten older, that people along the way, financial advice that taught us. But what was she doing? She doesn't know it, but she was teaching me how to be able to contain financial risk management, right? And so here's how I know people struggle with basic risk concepts in their life. And I'm going to get to the financial insecurity part, but I have people quote me all the time. I know, buy low, especially, the Facebook investors, right? Buy low, sell high when they see something drop, and yet they never do it. Why? They don't understand how to be able to make sound decisions during risk. And so obviously they don't really believe that to be true because they don't move, they don't do anything by it. So people can say that they will invest more when the market is down 20% and we're in a bear market, but in real life they don't do anything. What does that have to do with anything? It comes down to financial insecurity. That's the root cause of this. And so everyone understands rewards, but hardly anyone understands or take account of the risk. Years ago, I went to an event in California, and I'll never forget, I met the guy who actually was Robert Kiyosaki's mentor. I don't know if you know this, but Rich Dad Poor Dad is not a true story. It was a story that was actually made up. And I met the mentor that helped him develop the whole Rich Dad Poor Dad series. And I'll never forget that Cunningham was his last name. I can't remember his first name. Is it Stephen Cunningham? Keith Cunningham. I'll never forget that he said this. He never does any he's a billionaire. He never does any deal where he does not sit down first and look at all of the risk. And even the Bible tells us to do that, to count the cost. And so, I think it's really important. Reason why I think raising your financial IQ during this time is so important because people are unaware. There are really 8 key financial factors that are areas that are vitally important to raising your financial IQ. It's earnings, savings, investing, borrowing, consuming, and insuring. Those are 6 of the 8. Then you get into risk and leveraging. But inside of, abundance attraction really is the intensive that I have. I have a program that's called Abundance Attraction Intensive. One of the reasons why I designed this program is because I had 6-figure wage earners in who didn't understand borrowing. They were making bad decisions on going out and getting cars, and the interest rates, they were paying way too much. When you look at their earned income, like housing, they was buying way too much house. And so they was having over 30% of their income going towards housing. And so when you have, 45-50% going towards housing, it's hard for you to do anything. You're called being house poor, right? And so they had more than 15% of their income that they were spending on a car. Why do they do this? Because they lack having a financial IQ. And so, which is why that program was designed, and it hits all of those areas to teach you. So I don't care what level you're on. And so, again, Abundance Attraction Intensive, most people think that because we make north of $90,000, which is the majority of the people that are in my community, they don't need this program, but they do because they keep making bad financial decisions. And here's really why. Based on research data, I think it's by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, I read that 63% of Americans are financially illiterate. 63%. You cannot be fooled just because somebody drives a nice luxury car that they know what they're doing financially. I used to have this discussion with one of the elders of my church all the time. He would base how sound a person was, financially sound a person was, by the car that they drove. And I will always say that doesn't determine whether a person has money or not. They just needed the credit to be able to finance the car. Just because I drive a Mercedes Benz doesn't mean that I'm wealthy or prosperous. It doesn't mean that I have, I own a bunch of assets. That just means that I qualify to either lease the car or make the car payment. That's it. And so you can't ever, my kids growing up, we will always tell them the same thing. Never be impressed by this. Show me your balance sheet. Show me, all of the income producing, cash flow producing things that you have. And then we can sit down. Then I'm impressed. But I'm never impressed by what a person wears on their body. I'm never impressed by what a person drives, because those are all depreciating items. They're not putting money in their pocket unless you own a boutique. and you're making money off of the clothes that you're wearing as advertising, then it's a different story. But based on this research, it showed that 63% of Americans are financially illiterate. And so they lack basic skills to reconcile their bank accounts. Listen, pay their bills on time, pay off debt, and plan for the future. If that doesn't sound like it's a lot, 63% of Americans are financially illiterate. I need you to hear me and listen to this. That means that 208,531,670 million people are financially illiterate in this country. That's over 200 million people are financially illiterate in the country. And so, when I read the study further on, it went on to say that, as a study was done, it measured the knowledge of fundamental financial principles. We're talking about compounding interest and, the effects of inflation. Many people don't understand the effects of inflation. I had a conversation recently where a lady was like, I don't understand why, we're having so many financial issues in the economy. We can just print more money. That tells you a person that really lacked the knowledge behind quantitative easing. You can't just print more money and put it out there, because that causes hyperinflation, and hyperinflation is never good. Hyperinflation causes people to be laid off their jobs. Hyperinflation really erodes the value of the American dollar. And so again, that goes back to over 208 million people lack are financially illiterate. And so, when I look further at that report, literally, it becomes really dangerous. Here's why this is dangerous. When I looked at the report, it said that 65% of people ages 25 to 65 years old literally lack financial intelligence. 25 to 65 years old. This is why this is dangerous. It's the peak earning years. And if you are financially illiterate during your peak financial years, earning potential wise, you can't make great financial decisions. You end up like the people with the yellow happy faces at Walmart welcoming you in the door. Age 25 to 65. Those are your peak earning years. And so 43% of Americans are financially insecure. Going to talk about that in a minute. 78% of the American workers are living paycheck to paycheck. That's almost 80% of people that are living paycheck to paycheck. That means if I have 10 people in front of me, like we quarantine, right? Social distancing. I can't be beside more than 10 people at a gathering at a time. Out of 10 people, 8 of the 10 are living paycheck to paycheck. That's huge. And this was before coronavirus. So you can only imagine what's going on now that, we've had this pandemic. Women are especially vulnerable because 81% of them report living paycheck to paycheck as compared to 75% of men. And then almost 40% of Americans have no savings at all. And so that's why you see the numbers. You can see a food bank with 800 cars outside of the food bank because people just weren't prepared. And so it's not just about building wealth. It's just about being prepared for life, because life happens, right? And so I read a survey that was taken of 1,000 people, and it says 86% of 1,000 people said that they were broke. That's almost 90% of the people that they surveyed. And so we can never be deceived by thinking just because we sit next to someone in a cubicle, and you know how much you make, that they come to work every day, that they're okay financially. 80% of Americans are caught up in the chains of debt. 80% of Americans are caught up in the chains of debt. That means, again, 8 out of 10 people, are strapped with debt. And so you can't afford during this time. I had a conversation earlier today. You can't afford not to invest in your financial education. You can't. The middle class is actually shrinking, and the gap between the have and the have-nots is getting wider and wider. And so that's why I said financial insecurity is a manifestation of self-worth problem and not necessarily a net worth problem. People who don't really believe that they can climb up out of the financial mire, or muck and mire that they're in, they don't move, they don't do anything. That is not a net worth problem. That is a self-worth problem, because they don't believe that they can within themselves do it. And so while we generally presume that feeling financially insecure is, I guess, an accurate response to, a perceived condition of financial lack, it's not. It's really the cause of financial lack. And so, really what I just said is how you feel about you, the investment to increase you, and the fear of moving forward is the cause of financial lack. And so it's important during this time, I said it before on a live, that if we've never paid attention to it before, this should have shown people how financially vulnerable that you really are. If you were to lose your job today, could you last a week? Could you last 2 weeks? Could you last a month? And so, financial insecurity leaves you with the inability to financially prepare for emergencies or for future money goals like your golden years. So when we look at the crash of 2008, you go back further, the savings and loans bubble crash, the dot-com bubble crash, the housing bubble crash, the government bubble that's looming now. When you go back, one of the things when I look at 2008, and my husband and I had owned property in Kinnicky, in Outer Banks. And so I promised myself coming out that we would never get caught like that again. And that's when I started learning about bubbles and market cycles and stuff. And so I promised myself that I would never be caught in a situation like this again. And so there's an opportunity for you to decide now, even if you're not at a place where you could financially get in on, our investment class that we're teaching now, 14-week class that's in the process now. Make a decision that you won't be here again in the next cycle. And so markets reset themselves every 8 to 10 years. Make sure, again, I'm going to make a decision that I'm never going to not be able to take advantage of opportunity. And so, again, I promised myself that I wouldn't be caught in a situation like this again. And so there's opportunity for you to make that decision now, and then start educating yourself now so you'll be ready in the next crash. Gain control over your financial lives so that you'll never again be passive victims of a game that you don't understand. That's what happens when you have a low financial IQ, is because you don't understand. And so in order for me to do that, I personally had to get rid of some insecurity. I had to get rid of some financial insecurity. And so everyone has fears. If you say you've never struggled with fears in your life, you are lying. Everyone has fears that we're not enough, that we're not worth enough, we're not smart enough, we're not rich enough, we're not strong enough, we're not skinny enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not, light enough, the right complexion, we didn't come from the right family. Everyone deals with those types of insecurities. And so we're afraid that if we're not enough, then prosperity won't be achieved for us. And so it's not a money issue that you have to deal with first. It's a financial insecurity issue that you have to deal with first, as to why you won't invest in you, making you a better person, doing zero personal development. And so when we are afraid that we're not enough, again, then prosperity won't be achieved. We can't do it, because it's as a man thinketh in his heart. And his thinker, his feeler, and his chooser, so is he, right? And so your thinking is a big part of you, not only being able to make it through in the bad times in the market, but the good times too, being able to take a hold of opportunity. And so our solution for this is to come up with 1 or 2 things to change the meaning to. You gotta change the meaning. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who felt like April is the worst month of the year for her. It's the time that her mother died. You know, her husband lost his mother in April. And I sent her something. I said, listen, you gotta change the meaning. Your kids were grown adults and they had so much time to spend with your mother. My kids never had the opportunity to meet the woman that raised me for my formative years. They never had the opportunity to meet my grandmother. So every April isn't a doom and gloom. It's how you look at it. It's a celebration that you had so many wonderful years. There are millions of people around the world that don't grow up with a mother. So we got to learn how to change the meaning that we give to things that may not have worked out for us financially. We didn't get the raise that we wanted to get. We didn't get the job. That just simply means that I got to learn more value, or maybe my messaging or me being able to deliver or articulate how valuable I am to the company didn't come out right. So you just have to learn how to do, better your messaging. But again, find out what your fears are and create a strategy to change. And so what story are you telling yourself? A way to solve financial insecurity issues is to pay attention to the story that you tell yourself, the story of your life, of you overcoming no matter what. Is that going to be your story? Or why your financial life is the way that it is and it's not my fault? Like you become a victim. My mother and my father didn't teach me about money. So what? My mother and father didn't teach me about money either. Like you can't go on blaming everybody for why you're in the situation that you're in. Like no one owes you nothing in life. So what is the meaning to the story of your life that you are telling yourself? And so you are worthy of an investment. I had a person that I was talking to today about a particular program, and I just simply asked, what are you afraid of? Like, what are you afraid of? And because she had been following me for some time, and a client of my husband and ours, I said, has everything that we've instructed you to do, has it worked out for you? And she was like, absolutely, it has worked out. So what are you afraid of? We can't be afraid of elevating during this time. So find out what your fears are, why you are in the house. Be honest with yourself. What are some of your financial fears? Find out what your fears are and create a strategy to change, a strategy to upgrade that, or a strategy to excel financially with your knowledge. Ask yourself, how come you don't read? And not only, you look at the statistics of the people that finish a book, it's so slim. Not just buying the book, but being able to read it from the beginning to the end, not glance through, not, oh yeah, I have that book too, but did you read it? Not only did you read it, did you get anything from it? What did you get from it? What notes did you take? What can you apply to your life? What was life applicable to you in reading that book? And so spend more time. I read an article that during this quarantine that people are spending more money on alcohol than they are on personal development or education. And so again, these are things. What are you afraid of? You got to figure it out so you can overcome those fears. People spend more during this time on things that's not even going to increase them financially. And so I read an article, I think this is really low, but they said that Americans spend on average $1,800 a year on clothes. Now, listen, I personally think that's low. I don't know anybody's just spending $1,800 a year on clothes, but if that's your number, this is low. I get it for some of you, but for the people that spend that a year, they're also afraid to spend $1,500 on a program that could help them. $2,000, attending a training on, how to buy, real estate investment properties. You're afraid to spend that, but you complain about, I want to be able to make more. Why is that? That is because of financial insecurity. And so what keeps you from believing that you are worthy? What keeps you from believing that you are worthy? And so one of the things I love my clients, I'm getting ready to close because we've been on for 30 minutes, but one of the things I love about my clients that win is because they move in spite of fears. You know, they move in spite of still being afraid. And that's, I heard Oprah Winfrey say, that's what courage really is. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is you moving on, moving forward in spite of the fear. That's what courage is. And so we are living in a time now where not only do we need to raise our financial IQ so we can do better during these times, but also get rid of all of the financial insecurities that we have so we can make better financial decisions. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week. If you have any questions, let me know. Ask the questions in the comments, and I'll jump right on and start answering your questions. Thank you.